People come from all walks of life. They all have lives they lead. Any and all are welcome here to come and chat with me.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Well, this is being taped November 17th, and it's a beautiful but chilly sunny day here in Chilliwack. And I have to say, we're all so pleased that it's not raining again, because so many people have had to be evacuated and can't get in their homes yet. Anyway, I just want to say, we hope they're all going to be safe. Now, I love doing this show, and there's so many different reasons why. And I saw this profile, and it says, parents hire me so they can have the peaceful family they desire. And I thought, whoa, what's that about? So time to find out with today's guest, welcoming Linda Clement. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah, that was kind of intriguing when I saw that. And then I saw this other part that says 10 tips for talking to tweens. So I want to know, before we get to talk about what that is all about, I want to know how you decided to do this.
This is started. I was originally a Little League leader. I actually was a leader for 30 years,
Okay.
but I started this in 2002 because I had a group of moms who didn't leave. They just kept coming, and their kids were 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we talked about all the things parenting. We talked about food and nutrition and control tactics and things that don't work for communication and education, homeschooling, all kinds of stuff. And then along around some point of that, I realized that these moms with little tiny babies were coming into this room with these crazy screaming children and, doing that thing. So I split it into 2 groups. And after that, one of the moms from the experienced moms group said, could you put on a parenting course? Because my husband's tired of arguing with me through you, and he doesn't want to keep hearing what Linda says. At that point, I wrote a course called Raising Adults, Not Kids, with the tagline, because there's enough 4-year-olds walking around in 40-year-old bodies already. My goal has always been to help parents understand the position that their kids are in, where they are developmentally, how they see the world, and it is dramatically different than how adults think they see the world, and to meet them there and help them and support them in the capacities that they actually have, rather than this sort of, you're supposed to have all these things that you just haven't grown into your head yet. And to be able to support kids to get to 20-ish as adults instead of getting to 45 as children.
We've seen them, haven't we?
Yes, we have. I saw one on the road not very long ago. I'm going to call him a clown, but he's a very dangerous clown. He doesn't think anybody else on the road should ever be ahead of him. And if anybody ever, say, honks at him because he does something startling and alarming around them, he'll do things like whip around them super fast and then stop in front of them.
Wow.
It's really, really childish to watch. And clearly he thinks he's in control of everything and doesn't really have any sense that anybody else is real. And there's, grades and shades of that, but that's all over the place. Even for myself, there's still things that I think, well, that was really petty and immature and unhelpful. And it's a genuine challenge to not do things that are petty and immature, because those are the coping skills I learned as a young child. And when you learn, one of the things that I found out a long time ago is that when kids are required to mimic adult behavior way too young, like the 6-year-old who's taking care of her 2 younger siblings, like literally feeding them dinner, getting them up, taking them to daycare. When that 6-year-old has to do those adult responsible things, they mimic adult responsibility and don't learn it when they get to the brain parts that can actually do it, because they're too frightened. They can't let go of what they've had to do to survive. So they never get to adapt to the new brain pieces, because they never feel safe enough. So they don't get to explore and try out how it works and figure out these new brain components. So they just keep sort of steamrolling ahead on the coping skills they came up with as very young children.
Right.
And as we know, very young children come up with some really weird coping skills
Yes.
because, they're just trying their best to survive.
Yes. So now, how did you get that to actually getting hired to help parents?
That was kind of the next thing after the course. I was reading a lot of stuff by Martha Beck, the life coach from the United States, who said people just asked her questions. And then when she said, yeah, I'm available for that, but not like right away, they'd be like, well, I'll pay you. Like, okay, I can be paid to help you figure out your life. And I was actually thinking that life coaching would be a kind of a thing for me anyways, because that was my situation. People were constantly asking me how to do this, that, or think about the other thing. And then in 2002, when I decided to form the company, I decided to be a parenting coach. I was certified by the Coaches International and decided that the niche that I would work in was parenting. And I have the feeling I was probably the first one, but I have no way of proving that. It's just, I'd never heard of one until 4 or 5 years at least later. There was another one that I heard of, but
You're the first one I've heard of.
okay. There's definitely a couple of them in the Lower Mainland, but mostly they do like really little kids, like they do toddler stuff or preschool stuff. Some of them are in connection with preschools. There is one other guy, I think he's in Maple Ridge or Langley, and he does a lot of men's work. He does a lot of work with the Transition House and working to prevent violence against women. But he also sort of advertises as a parenting coach in addition to his counseling practice.
Right. I'm just thinking about, like in school, we're taught so many things, but not how to take care of ourselves, or when you're in high school, not how, what if you become a parent or whatever,
Yeah.
At least not when I went to school. It might be different now, but I don't know. Is it?
I took one course in grade 12. I don't know that it still exists. It was a pilot course at the time, and it was called family management. But it was literally like half a year, because we did semesters, so it was half a year course, and we did everything from family nutrition to birth defects, the issues around adoption.
Right.
It was not parenting. We talked about children's development and needs, but in maybe 4 classes out of the whole semester. Like it was interesting. I found it very informative, and it led me to read a lot more in the field. And there was a lot more in the field by that time than there had been in the 60s and 70s, when you could read Dr. Spock or nobody.
Yeah. Well, no, it's true. Well, just thinking about, anybody can have a baby. It doesn't mean they know how to be a parent.
Yeah. I like how Terry Pratchett quips. He says, without having to pass a test, except the obvious physical one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a practical exam, making small children out of things you have at home.
So now,
well, and the problem is that people get, it's a function of that sense of loyalty and survival that little kids have. I have to keep the adults who are essentially gods in my world
right,
on my side, or they'll kill me or just neglect me to death or something. For little kids, that's a very real fear that they need that very much. And they're not foolish about that. If a kid gets, really disliked and really unwanted, they often do get, either beaten to death or given to somebody else or left out in the rain or whatever. There's a fair amount of child abuse in history that ends up in infanticide, really.
Yeah.
But we've forgotten that that's a real fear for little kids.
Right.
So when they grow up with this, you must do this and you are bad, and all those kinds of, the inner voice that comes from that kind of parenting, they grew up believing that what their parents did was right. It was necessary. They deserved it. They had to have it. It was literally, they needed to be treated this way, because they can't be disloyal to their families. But unfortunately, those families are not being disloyal to their families. And we're going back to somebody's nanny in 1620 or something. They didn't know anything about kids then. They didn't have any understanding of child development.
Right.
So we're being loyal to people who we've never even heard their names, because out of that sort of intergenerational passing on the way we talk to people.
Right.
I've met so many parents who say, I was a little kid when I decided I was never treating my kids like that. And then I had my mother's mouth coming out of my face. and that's often why they come to me, because they're like, I didn't want to do this. I knew I didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to do instead. And I don't know what to do when my anger rises through my body and my dad's voice comes out my mouth. So that's what I do. I help parents disconnect that and put in place better strategies and better skills that really do support the actual needs of children and match their capacities with their expectations.
Yeah, that is so awesome. Because I was just thinking that, I was one of those people who didn't want to do to my children what was done to me. And then I find out that a lot of the stuff that I didn't want done to me, I did do to my children.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with the consequences of that as they became adults, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I certainly did the same. My kids are 32 and 30 now. And I absolutely can look back on things and go, oh.
Yes.
And there were things that I did that I believed very strongly at the time were a great idea. And I found out are really a bad idea. And they don't do what people want. They don't create cooperation. They don't create helpful, productive kids who don't need to drink to get to sleep. Like they just don't do the stuff that we say we want for kids. They don't help them be themselves. They don't support their needs or abilities. There's lots of that stuff. I actually was super strongly opposed to spanking, which I didn't do. Thankfully, I managed to control that part. But I thought for a long time, timeouts would be a great idea. And the answer is no, they're not, actually. And in fact, it uses a form of a power tool that's kind of like using a chainsaw to carve an egg. It's the withdrawal of affection is intensely difficult for little kids because they need us and they know it. And when we use that, I'm going to ignore you, or I'm going to leave you at the end of the hall and not talk to you, and you have to sit there in silence. And I don't even know what people think toddlers are going to do in that situation. Think about what they did.
Yeah.
No, they're going to panic about missing out on your love, and they're next going to do anything it takes to get it back. And that can look like timeouts work, but what it actually does is make them feel like they are inherently wrong as people, unlovable, and that they have to perform in order to be acceptable.
Yes. Wow.
I didn't mean to do that. I'm sorry.
No, listen, I'm just reliving a lot of it, so I get it, I really get it. And I just want to switch topics, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about your tips for talking to tweens, because that's kind of fascinating to me. So you have 10 tips, it says here. So talk about these tips and how you developed them or how you came to them.
These are the kinds of things that people tend to present with. They come saying, oh, the attitude, or where did my teen go? Or where did my 9-year-old go? A minute ago, they were cooperative and responsible and reliable, and they have turned into people who don't even know the rules to the house that have been here for the last 9 years. And they're attacking their siblings or me. They forget everything. They forget what they said 10 seconds ago. They are just sullen and they're hiding in their rooms. And the connection that we used to have is just evaporated overnight. And I don't understand what's happening. And I think most of it is because of a bunch of brain development and some hormones that are happening at that time. But it's also our cultural expectation that people grow and learn in a linear fashion, which is nonsense. Don't actually do that. People get good at stuff with the brain that they have at the moment, and then they develop some new brain components, and they don't do that stuff anymore. So they have to relearn how to do things with their new brain components. So around 9, 10, 11, they have about 30% of the neural connections cut in the process of building the prefrontal cortex, which is where they will get executive function. They don't have it yet. That's coming in, 12, 13, 14 is when that really grows back in, and they learn how to drive that.
Okay.
So a friend of mine from Fort Langley, her dad used to say, the kids' child brain has fallen out and their adult brain hasn't grown in yet. And it's actually really accurate. They lose the ability to tell long narrative stories about their own childhoods that they used to remember things back to when they were 14 or 18 months old. And then all of that's gone. They go to sort of more flashes of memory, like photographic reference memories. And they start telling stories from the perspective of the photos or videos that they've seen of themselves, rather than from their own perspective. Like a lot of their memories just disappear because those neural connections that used to hold them are cut, so that they can learn how to do things like understand that other people can see the back of their head.
Wow. That's so intriguing. It really is.
It is. It's when I first found out about the kinds of things little kids can't do because they don't have the brain parts. It changed everything about what I thought about them. Because when you think of a sort of 3-year-old who's having a fit because they won't leave the toy store because they can't have whatever it was they saw last, and you think, well, they're just being greedy and selfish and entitled. No, they're just interested in continuing exploring what it was that they were looking at, and they're not on your agenda. Actually, they don't have the same time frame you do, and they wanted to look at that and explore it and get to know it until they were done. And the fact that it's time to something or another doesn't really enter into their world. They're just trying to figure out life as people. They've only been alive 36 months. Give them a little bit of a break. They're not responding to things the way an adult would be. If you saw that adult behavior, you'd think there was something seriously wrong with those people. You know, they'd obviously skipped a bunch of necessary development. But in a 3-year-old, it's really ordinary, and it's not pathological, and it is no symptom of not going to be okay as an adult. Because a 3-year-old isn't half a 6-year-old, and they are not 10% of a 30-year-old either. They haven't got the brain parts yet to have that sense of perspective, gratitude, risk assessment. They don't have it yet.
Yeah.
They're just being, their little experimental selves trying to figure out how to live in this world and how all of it goes.
I often think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It just really changed how I viewed things. Like, I was the same kind of person as everybody else who says, well, that's a brat and that's the parents' fault. Well, that's a kid who wants to keep doing what they wanted to keep doing. And that's how everybody is.
Yeah.
They just don't have mature communication skills, and they don't know how to negotiate and say, actually, I wasn't finished checking this piece out. And I don't demand to have it at my house. I just don't want to leave it here yet. I'm not finished with it.
Yeah. I often think about kids like they live in the now.
Oh, very much.
Right?
Yes.
Not the future.
Yeah.
They definitely don't live in the future. It's like now.
Yeah. Well, and 3-year-olds have absolutely no idea what later means. That's somebody else. That's going to happen to anybody else. I wrote an article a long time ago called "I Don't Negotiate with Terrorists." That was about negotiating with 3-year-olds, because you can't enter into an if-then conversation with a 3-year-old. Like, if you do this, then you can have that. That doesn't make any sense to them, because they'll literally agree to being killed to get what they want right now, because that's happening to somebody else. That's nothing to do with it. The only kind of negotiation that makes sense to little kids is, when you finish this, then you can do that. As opposed to, I'll give you this and that means you'll have to do that. They can't do that.
Right.
That's a foreign country to them.
So give me an example of a question a parent comes and asks you regarding their tween.
The tweens. What's happened to my kid? Where did my kid go? Is one of the things that often is asked, because people just don't know why their previously good at school kid is bringing home D's now. They used to go along with all kinds of things and they were cheerful, and suddenly they're fighting back and screaming about stuff. One of the parents that I spoke to recently about that conversation, exactly, like, what is it the parents are asking? What are they talking about? She said, we're all really terrified that we're damaging our kids. We want to know for sure that we're not hurting our kids,
Right.
that we're not doing something terrible to them, that we're not missing out on something that they really need. There's a lot of fear in parenting, as you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I imagine you've met parents who both children went to like, say, the public school system, private school system, and children who are homeschooled. Have you seen a difference? And
oh, it's a tremendous difference. Yeah.
Now, in what way is there a difference?
I think that the first difference is that kids that don't go to the public school system don't lose a sense of agency about their own education. Now, if the school at home was very much, we're sitting in the garage in desks and lines and the chalkboards at the front of the room and mom's doing the talking. That can be very much the same sort of pressure to believe that whoever developed the curriculum is the right way to learn things and the only order to learn them in, and this before that, all those sort of pieces to it. And if you don't succeed at that, then you are a failure, because this is your education and you need to keep up, and all that comparing to other things. But a lot of homeschoolers find very early on that doesn't work very well, and it isn't very necessary, because kids learn all the time. There's not really much you can do about it without anesthetizing them. And in general, I found that kids who are homeschooled are much more likely to come up with their own way of doing things. They'll start companies or pitch in with their parents' companies, or be much more entrepreneurial much early on in life. It's not universal. There's lots of homeschoolers who happily went into college and got degrees and then went and did that corporate ladder thing, and tend to be successful at it. But they do what they personally really believe in and really are curious about. So they often have an art. That's actually one of the most distinctions that I can see in homeschooling kids. In kids in school, especially in high school, if they aren't in band or in choir, they don't have like a sideline of music or instruments or their own art. Whereas most homeschoolers seem to continue to be that creative end of things. Most of them end up being very skilled at least one kind of art. And that, I think, is a real difference. A lot of kids go through high school believing that they can't paint, they can't draw, they can't, like, they just walk around going, well, I can't sing, I can't play a musical instrument, I can't dance, because the system doesn't really support the idea that you should do it just because you enjoy it, rather than, that's for the good people and that's for making sure you get a good grade.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked, I worked for somebody who homeschooled their children, and I was fascinating how, like, they obviously had their classes they had to take, right? The things their parents taught her, but they also, the mother especially, spent a lot of time with them doing crafty things, or exploring different things that, like you said, you wouldn't get that chance in school, in regular school system.
Yeah.
Because it just,
for most kids, the art in school is so product driven. Here's the cutout tree and the cutout sunshine, make a cutout of construction paper and sign it, and we'll put it all on the wall, and look how different they all are. It's very rare to see a school that has process art, like, here's a bunch of materials, do whatever you want with them, and then we'll post those. Whereas, because homeschoolers tend to be like, let's play with the stuff, let's see how it works, let's paint on rocks or whatever, it tends to be much more the process of playing with the materials and seeing how they feel and seeing how they interact with each other. And then, oh, that's the product of that, as opposed to that, we need to entertain 30 kids, we should do crafts. And then it's this sort of stilted, specific, it should all kind of look like this. And then that's not a place where art exploration gets to live. So that piece of them just falls away from that. Right. And they don't tend to keep it up at home unless they're really obsessed with it.
Right. Oh, it is fascinating. And I keep repeating fascinating, interesting, because those are the words I keep thinking of. Now, as you said, you've been doing this for a while. So I'm kind of curious to see, or to know, sorry, how many people you had, like, parents coming back with the results of whatever,
Yeah, I actually get that fairly often. And it's always the kind of thing that makes all the hair on my body stand up, because they say things like, one woman that I only talked to her for about 40 minutes. This is not a good business plan, by the way. You shouldn't take 40 minutes and fix everything for the whole teen years. I haven't quite worked out how not to do that yet. But I talked to her for about 40 minutes, just casually. We were working together, and she's like, can I talk to you for a minute about my kid? And she was right in that phase of sassy and surly, and what on earth is going on, and why is she following her friends around or having these huge friend dramas all of a sudden? And we just talked for 40 minutes, and I made a couple of suggestions and sort of gave her a bit of perspective. And she came back to me about 7 years later and said, this sometimes makes me cry, actually. She said all through her teen years, she's a single mom with a teenage girl. All through her teen years, she watched the other kids in her world, like her daughter's friends, pulling farther and farther away from their parents, and their parents getting angrier and more afraid and less effective over the duration. And many of her friends no longer talk to their families at all. They've completely alienated themselves. The connection was destroyed through their teen years because they just didn't do what I suggested she do. And she said it made just one conversation made a world of difference to how she thought about everything her daughter was doing. And they built a connection. They're best of friends. They spend lots of time together. Her daughter's moved out, but she, comes over and hangs out for the afternoon or takes her mom out for lunch, or they spend a huge amount of time together. And she said it is entirely because of that conversation.
Beautiful. That is so beautiful. Love that. Well, on that note, we're just about out of time, but one of the things I'm going to ask you to send me, so when I render this, I can add it. Do you have a website? How do people contact you?
I do. Mostly people find me on Facebook.
Okay.
And that 10 Tips for Tweens is actually on my banner. So it's easy to find out that you've got the right Linda Clement.
Okay.
And that's available for free. I just give that away to everybody because I think everybody needs some more tips on handling that particularly bizarre and startling phase.
Okay.
So I'm Linda.Clement733 on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, Thrive Parenting Coach, and somewhere else. Oh, my website is raisingparents.net.
Okay, great. Okay, so just down on camera while I say goodbye to the audience. Well, I hope everybody found this as intriguing as I did, because I mean, mind you, my kids are they're in their 40s, so it's too late now to go back and fix those things that I didn't do right. But I just want to say to people, like, as parents, it's okay to make a mistake as long as you get the proper information and then acknowledge it and just don't keep repeating that same mistake. So if contact Linda for any help, and I'm sure she'd be happy to advise you on whatever the issue is. Meantime, everybody, take care and stay tuned to the next show. Until then, peace out. If I can find you off, I do this every time.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.